Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Metro Outer Development Assessment Panel meeting. We'll get started. I'll declare the meeting open at 9:31. Acknowledge that we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respect to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2025 and the DAP Regulations 2011. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website. Panel members may refer to technical devices during the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. My name is Clayton Hyam and I'm the presiding member for today's meeting. With me I have Dale Page, the Deputy Presiding Member, online Premji, the third specialist member. In addition to that, we have Mayor Margaret Thomas for Part B and Councillor Kathy Ritchie for Part B online. And later on, we will have President Robert Coles and Councillor Nathan Bishop from the Shire of Serpentine, Jarrahdale for that item. There are no apologies and minutes from previous meetings are available on the DAP website. Turning to Part B, the City of Kalamunda item. Panel members, this is the declaration of due consideration. Panel members need to have considered all documentation contained within Part B of the agenda and Part B related information. Could I please have a confirmation by show of hands that members have duly considered all information? Thank you. Disclosures of interest. Mayor Thomas and Councillor Ritchie, did this item go to a council meeting or a briefing session?
No, presiding member.
Okay, thank you. Are there any disclosures of interest? No, thank you. All right, we'll move to the item. This is item 3.1, lot 500, Berkshire Road, Forestfield, the childcare premises. We have three presenters on this item today. And I remind you, we've also got members of the applicant's team apparently joining us online. So I'll remind you that we have read your presentation. You have 3 minutes and I will call you to wind up at the 3-minute mark. So the first presenter is Robert Ashworth. Mr. Ashworth, over to you.
Thank you. I own the property that's directly behind the proposal at number 17 Berkshire, Battle Axe property. One of our concerns is the volume of traffic on Berkshire Road. As we know, there's a black spot at the roundabout, which is increasing every day. And with this proposal, you put another 50 to 100 cars on the road, it's going to make it even worse and more dangerous. And exit and entry into our property is going to be impacted by this extra traffic. And we had the property sold and the buyers withdrew their offer when they found out that there was a childcare centre going there. So that's a big impact on us. The sale was contracted and they just withdrew it. It's more, and I think part of the Shire's criteria is can't have two childcares within 300 metres of each other, run down the road at 100 metres. This is, to me personally, is ridiculous, but you guys make the decision, and that's, I don't think anybody's comments are going to make a change in that, personally. That's about all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Ashworth. I'll just see if there are any questions of panel members.
Please.
Yes.
Mr. Ashworth, can I just clarify? I think I read in your submission, you're on the rear Battle Axe block, and so the Battle Axe leg that runs to your block adjoins this property. Is that
Outside
right?
the property, yes.
Okay. And you're concerned about the traffic at that point of access?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions from panel members? Thank you, Mr. Ashworth.
Okay.
Move to Leanne Cook.
Aye. Apologise in advance, it's going to be a little bit longer than 3 minutes.
We'll need to stop at 3 minutes.
I'll go as fast as I possibly can.
Bearing in mind, we've read your submission.
Okay, no worries. All right, you start? Yep. So we are here today to object to the proposed 104 place childcare centre in Forestfield on clear planning grounds. The assessment relies on outdated strategic assumptions, departs from the City of Kalamunda's adopted local planning policy, and fails to properly address current supply conditions and cumulative impacts, particularly in a residential street context. The responsible authority report relies heavily on the city's 2021 local housing strategy and historic demand modelling to justify the proposal. Since 2021, the childcare landscape in Forestfield has materially changed. Multiple new centres have opened and existing centres are operating with significant spare capacity. As you are aware, planning decisions must be made on current conditions, not superseded forecasts. The RAR does not test whether the assumptions underpinning the 21 strategy remains valid today, nor does it reconcile those assumptions with current operating realities on the ground. The city's own policy framework, LPP 10, states under its citing criteria that childcare premises in residential land zone should not be located within 300 metres of another childcare service. The proposed location is approximately 100 metres from Little Beginnings Education, our family-owned service. And it's within another 300 metres of 2 other additional services already operating. This represents a direct and unambiguous conflict with Council's adopted local planning policy. While the RAR acknowledges this non-compliance, it supports the variation primarily on the basis of population growth and demand, without addressing the planning purpose of the separation standard being 300 metres. The purpose of the 300 metre separation requirement is to avoid clustering of high intensity non-residential uses in residential areas and the cumulative impacts that flow from that clustering. Impacts include intensified peak period traffic movement, short stay parking pressures, vehicle circulations, repeated drop-offs and pickups, increased noise, blah, blah, blah. Despite the proximity to Little Beginnings Education being expressly acknowledged, the RAR's assessment only considers the proposed centre in isolation. The transport impact statement assesses only the proposed centre's trips and concludes there will be no material impact, but it does not assess the combined impacts of multiple centres operating within close proximity on the same local network. Given that clustering is the very issue the policy seeks to prevent, this is a significant omission. To test the RAR's assumption of undersupply, I have spoken directly with just 5 of the closest childcare services in the area. Their current occupancies, including ours, demonstrate substantial surplus to capacity. So our centre is at 65 occupancy. A centre 500 metres down the road is 55% occupancy. A centre 700 metres down the road is at 60% occupancy. A centre a kilometre away is at 65 occupancy. And what is most concerning is that a centre had just opened 12 months ago, which is a 104 place service, has only managed 29% occupancy. There are broader planning implications that warrant serious consideration. Approving an additional large centre in such close proximity risks undermining the orderly and equitable distribution of services, potentially leading to instability and closure, outcomes that are contrary to sound strategic planning and community resilience. So I will conclude. The proposed development is substantially non-compliant with LPP 10, relies on outdated strategic assumptions that do not reflect current supply conditions, fails to assess cumulative traffic amenity and clustering, and possesses unacceptable safety and residential amenity risks in this location. And I respectfully submit that proposal should not be supported by you.
Thank you. Questions from panel members?
So I guess just as a bit of a preamble, I guess from a planning perspective, when we're making decisions, we don't automatically refuse something if it doesn't comply with policy.
Okay.
So policy is a guiding document. So and you've leaned quite heavily on non-adherence to policy in your submission, and I have read that. Putting that aside, you've said that your concerns that you've raised are not because of commercial competition. So can I check in with you then, if they're not because of commercial competition, how does this proposal then affect you directly? So raising non-adherence with policy and so on is one thing, but how does it affect you directly if this centre, if it's not about commercial competition and this centre goes ahead, what is the impact on you?
The impact.
So your concerns that you're raising, how are you impacted by this centre? It's one thing to raise concerns about non-compliance, but let's park that for a minute, because arguably someone could raise, well, something 5 kilometres from me doesn't comply, but there's a so what factor associated with that. But I'm concerned, if you're in the vicinity, I'm trying to understand the concerns that you've raised. How do they impact on you?
Our main concern would be traffic impacts. Being Berkshire Road being extremely busy already. The Hale Road, Berkshire Road has been identified by the state government as a black spot. That hasn't been rectified by the City of Kalamunda as yet. Our peak times, which is morning and afternoon, traffic from the Hale Road, Berkshire Road is already banked up to our service in those peak times. And we're only a 55 place service. So you put a 104 place service closer to that intersection, we're going to have serious problems.
Thank you. You've answered my question.
Thank you. Thank you. That? Further questions? Oh, sorry, there is a further question. I beg your pardon.
Yes, just to go back to the question that was asked. Have your customers complained about the traffic to you?
We do have complaints about traffic, yes. A lot of the families also raised that issue when the notification came out from the council when you have to put in a submission. I believe there was 28 submissions and 27 of them were against the development, and some of the major concerns were from our families and local residents in relation to the traffic.
And was it just parking or just a queuing up?
If you look at statistics on the huge amount of accidents that have occurred at that intersection and in front of our service, people fly down that road. And just down the road from us is an old aged care facility. Congestion is there and accidents as well. So yeah, it's a major concern considering we have a lot of school children from the local school walking up and down that road as well. So yes, it has been a major concern from our families and the local community, because the people that did the proposal for the childcare service have only looked at the transport impact for that service, not for our service and as well. So it makes no sense.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. On to the next presenter is Brendan Foley, and Brendan has been granted 10 minutes. He requested 10 minutes. He was granted 10 minutes. Brendan.
Thank you.
Bearing in mind that we read your submission and we got a reply from.
Appreciate it. Just as in this room, where do I speak to? Do I speak to a camera or do I talk to you?
I'll be probably here, I suppose, and the camera will pick up.
All right, thank you. Thank you, presiding member, members of the panel. I'm here today to speak on behalf of the proponent and supported by a wide range of the various consultants that assisted in the preparation of the application. If there are any questions from members of the panel. I did submit the written submission, and as I understand it, which had some modifications to the RAR resolution, if the panel was desiring to follow that path. I understand that the city wrote back and said that they were generally okay with it, apart from the word generally in number 2. From my perspective, that makes no difference whether generally is in or out when you have those words at the end, which say to the satisfaction of the city of Kalamunda. So with that in mind, I'll just use the rest of my time to respond to some of the matters that were raised by the other submitters. So the first one is in relation to competition and the policy position. So the High Court confirmed in Kentucky Fried Chicken and Gantitis all the way back in 1979 that economic competition is not a valid planning consideration. Only to the extent as long as you're satisfied that the opening of this isn't going to cause a reduction in services to the area, which can happen sometimes when something new opens up. That's not the case here, and that position is supported by the city's assessing officers. The second is in relation to the city's local planning policy, which seeks the 300-metre separation. So the first point, as was picked up by one of the members of the panel, is that policy is not binding on the decision maker, it is a guide. The second is that the policy itself doesn't mandate refusal. It actually uses the word may as a preface to the locational criteria. And the third is that the reason that it says may is not to do with clustering, it's got to do with the making sure that there are services spread throughout the locality, which is picked up in the RAR report. And the officers of the council have confirmed that this won't have a negative impact on the spread of childcare services throughout the locality. The second point that I want to pick up on, which is linked to this, is the question about occupancy and looking at other centres. Looking back or at the current levels in centres in the area is not particularly helpful when you're dealing with something that's dealing with children that are yet to be born or to be born, and changes in government and Commonwealth policy. So there's been a recent change where government funding for a 3rd day of childcare will be supported by government, and that we see will have a material impact on the need and demand in this area, together with the upzoning that's occurred through changes in the planning scheme, which mean that there's a number of those older, larger lots progressively being subdivided, which means that there are new families moving into the area, which leads to an increased demand for childcare services in the future. The last one is on this transport issue, and we do have Paul Gantos, who's the traffic engineer here. The comment that says that the assessment doesn't take into account the existing facilities is just not correct. That assessment does take into account the existing situation and then adds the expected traffic load from this facility onto that. So it considers all of everything that exists now is factored in to that assessment. When we deal with the actual numbers, we're not talking about a huge change here. We're expecting 37 in, 37 out during the peak periods, which is well within the context of Berkshire Road's classification and the existing traffic demand. And just a final point on this black spot issue, I'm not taking away that there might be an intersection in the locality. There are a number through all localities that are nominated for black spot funding. It it's indicated that that intersection was 2,145th in the state for all crashes, and Blackstock nominations relate to pre-existing geometric or visual issues, not traffic volumes. And so the additional peak hour movements dispersed across the network are not expected to change the risk profile of that particular intersection.
That's it.
If you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to address those for you.
We'll go to questions then. Members, are there questions? Member Page.
Could we bring Mr. Gantos to the table, please? Couple of questions, if I may. Could you please very briefly comment on Robert Ashworth's concerns about traffic congestion at the intersection of the Battle Axe leg and the access point to the centre?
Sure. If I've had a look at the aerial just as this point was raised, if I've got my bearings right, I think that the Battle Axe access is on the southeastern boundary of the site, and our crossover is on the other side, so it's on the northwestern boundary. So practically speaking, our development driveway is positioned as far away from that Battle Axe access as possible. And in my experience with childcare centres of this size, you don't get substantial queuing on the road of traffic waiting to turn in. So really, I don't anticipate any queuing to impact access to the Battle Axe lot. And if that Battle Axe lot, I think it's just got one dwelling on it, usually that might generate one trip during the peak hour, 1 or 2 trips maximum. So it's not high-rise apartments where there's a lot of traffic using that access. So practically, I don't see any material impact from the development.
Thank you. And then could you comment for me, please, on the issues that were raised by Leanne Cook about the potential impacts of 104 Place Centre on traffic more generally along Berkshire Road?
Sure. So this road, based on my reporting and the information available, it's a District Distributor A standard road. And in the main roads hierarchy, the target traffic volumes on those types of roads is above 8,000 vehicles per day. So currently in this section of the road, we're under 6,000 vehicles per day. And so there's a lot of capacity there in terms of the intended function of the road. So this road being a district distributor, it has a dual function. It provides for regional traffic movements, and at the same time, it provides for local access to abutting properties. But in terms of the intended function of the road, it can theoretically carry much higher traffic volumes, and it wouldn't trigger a need for traffic management measures to reduce that traffic, because that's the intended future function of the road. I would say it's probably carrying less traffic than a lot of other roads I've seen, which are actually lower in the hierarchy. So it's relatively quiet to other places I've seen.
Thank you.
Mayor Thomas.
My question is to Mr. Foley. So the city's happy that you are happy to take that word generally out because, you know, satisfaction of the city does cover it. And I agree that 11.4 is a bit difficult in that you shouldn't have to protect things on adjoining properties, and the city acknowledges that. Apart from that, are you happy with the 29 conditions? Are you happy with all of the rest of the conditions?
Yes, so all the rest of the only conditions that we are requesting modification to are the ones that are set out in my submission. So those are in number 2, that bit about the satisfaction of the city. It also includes updating the reference to the fire management plan and bushfire emergency plan. There's a small change to condition 5, which relates to the notification being put on the title. That's just a practical change. And then the wording to condition 11 is that tree protection area. So they're the only changes. And the last one was to condition 29, which also adds, unless otherwise approved by the City of Kalamunda, to the end of the bushfire plan. And that's because those have a finite life and need to be updated over time.
Further questions of the presenters? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move to the item. We'll go to the officers first. To Mariana, are there any comments you want to make at this stage?
No questions for me. Thank you.
Okay, so are there questions of the officers? The page.
Yes, please. Thank you. So I have a few, if you'll indulge me. The requirement in your local planning policy 10, or the provision that a centre not be located within 300 metres of another centre, why is that included in your policy, and where's the 300 versus 250 versus 500? Where did the 300 come from?
Thank you for your question. Yeah, that's a good question. I did some research into that, and I think that it comes from the old planning bulletin for childcare centres, which does talk to childcare centres not being located within proximity to others. However, I'm not sure, I can't comment on the exact 300 metre distance and why that is that exact number. However, the new WAPC position statement for childcare centres no longer talks about separation distances. It more focuses on the amenity impacts of the childcare centres on adjoining properties. And the city is satisfied that the childcare centre, whilst we acknowledge that it is a variation to our policy and that there are other childcare centres within the 300 metre distance, that it does not impact on the amenity of the adjoining properties in terms of noise and building bulk, which we've done an assessment against the relevant R code if it was to be designed similarly to a residential scale building. And that also, the policy also talks to, the WPC policy, draft policy also talks to having a variety in sizes of childcare centres now, which this one provides an extra large facility, and I know the other one within proximity is a medium facility. So it does provide that diversity.
Thank you. Thank you. You answered that question. Could you comment on the assertions that the data you based your local planning strategy on are now or is now outdated, specifically the data that suggests there could be an under provision of centres for the future anticipated population growth?
Yes, so I would agree with that. There has been a projected, I'm pretty sure the population growth is higher than anticipated in the local housing strategy. The city is currently doing a review of its local planning strategy and local planning scheme at the moment. Consultation closed for that late last year, so we're currently reviewing that policy. I would agree that the statement is outdated and that it doesn't reflect the latest forecast as well as the West Australian Planning Commission's policy position statement.
Thank you. Looking at some of the conditions now, condition 6 requires the retaining walls to be designed by a structural engineer to your satisfaction prior to a building permit. Isn't that an automatic requirement? Why do you need a planning condition for that?
Yes, it is an automatic requirement for any retaining wall over 500 mil to be certified by a structural engineer. It's just a standard condition that the city imposes on all DAs to make sure it's submitted prior to the building permit for us to check it off.
And then condition 12, which relates to the quality of fill to be used during construction. Could you explain why or whether that has any relevant planning basis?
Oh, yeah, yes, thank you for your question. Again, that's a standard condition that the city imposes to make sure that the fuel bore on site is of a clean material.
Okay. All right. And then condition 16, when I read that condition, doesn't that duplicate the requirements of condition 15.1?
Yes, thank you for your question. I agree that it does duplicate the requirements of condition 15.1. So I'm happy for that one to be approved.
Okay. And then lastly, condition 25 requires that advertising signage should not cause annoyance to the public. So that when you read it on the face of it, that's a subjective thing. So how do you measure whether signage is a nuisance to the public? Do you rely on adherence to an Australian standard? And if so, is that then covered by condition 22? Also, the numbering of condition 22 needs to be corrected, and I think we'll do that administratively if that's okay.
Yes, in terms of your first question about the sign and flashing, we do rely on the Australian standard, which sets out the flashing and lighting requirements. So agree that does rely on Australian standards, and yes, happy for condition 22 to be amended.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions of the officers? Yes, Member Prenti.
Yes, thank you. First question. We've heard a lot about the traffic impact around the area. Has the city received directly any complaints about the traffic congestion or the amount of traffic, etc.?
In terms of from a planning perspective, so in the statutory planning department, I haven't seen any complaints come in relating existing traffic on that road. However, did we, one second, submissions about traffic?
I mean, complaints, but besides the ones that have come into the submissions, any other, excluding the submissions that have been made, have you received, as a council, received any complaints regarding traffic in that area, in that particular area?
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. No, not that I am aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you. My question relates to the number of childcare centres. Now, I acknowledge that as if the state one is now not talking about a 300 metres radius, but in the officer's report, they talk about one centre in close proximity. My understanding is there are another 3. So we're talking about a potential 4 within a very short space. And my concern is that ongoing one with the traffic, particularly at peak times, but also for amenity, which is the one thing that is mentioned about amenity. And so we do now have 4 childcare centres potentially within a very short space of distance. And I'm concerned about both traffic and that notion of loss of amenity in a residential area.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Oh, do you want me to? Sorry.
Yes, please. Yes, I'll take that as a question.
Thank you. Yes, acknowledge your concerns about the number of childcare centres, and that's not acknowledged in the RAR that there's more than one within the 300 metres. I guess the city relies on the traffic reports with the application and our internal traffic engineers to provide a review on whether the traffic generated from any development, whether it be a childcare centre or increase the change in zoning or anything, to determine whether the traffic levels are appropriate. The applicants submitted their traffic report and we've reviewed it, and I'm happy that the traffic generation is appropriate for this area and for Berkshire Road. Regarding the separation, I mean, we take every application on its merits and make sure that it doesn't impact on the amenity of the adjoining properties. This one, we've looked at the surrounding context and area, as well as the future structure plan amendment that might occur, and we've deemed that it won't on the development. It's relatively low scale in terms of built form, and they've demonstrated through the noise that it won't have any adverse amenity impacts on the things.
Thank you.
Any further questions of the officers? Thank you very much to the officers. We'll move now to the item. Motion for approval with a number of conditions. Is there a mover for the item as published? Yes, Mayor Thomas. Is there a seconder for that? Member Page, thank you. Mayor Thomas, over to you.
Thank you very much. Look, this childcare centre is in a good location. It's consistent with residential areas. And I do note the comments of Mr. Ashworth and Ms. Cook. However, the owner must feel there is a need for additional childcare centres. This is a very fast growing area and we expect it to be much faster growing area. And it is their right to build something noting this is a free market, etc. I do understand your concerns about traffic. There is a traffic assessment report and it doesn't just look at this tiny area, it looks at the whole street. That's what the assessment report is. And if we ask for that and review it, we must look at it. I also note that the applicant was very happy to make changes for DFIS, who were concerned, but they are now supportive of this project and are happy with the changes that were made. And the design review panel gave a very positive response to the design of this childcare centre. Landscaping complies and, 29 conditions and 16 advice notes. I know a couple of the conditions are doubled up, but that is a lot of conditions that meet all the things the city requires. And I think we should support this project.
Thank you, Mayor Thomas. I'll now move to the seconder, Member Page.
Thank you, presiding member. Before I speak to the substantive motion, I'd like to move a series of amendments, if I could.
Yes, by all means.
Thank you. So the first of that is to amend condition 2 so that the condition reads, the development being carried out in accordance with the plans, drawings and documents listed below, including any amendments to those plans, were amended by other conditions of this approval to the satisfaction of the City of Kalamunda.
I think if these amendments are following the Brendan Foley advice and the city's response to that, we probably could deal with them in block if you want to deal with all those ones first, or deal with them separately.
Separately, if that's okay.
All right, not a problem. Okay. So, and do you want to change? Are we changing the?
So I'm suggesting we amend the condition as per the wording recommended by Mr. Foley, but removing the word generally in accordance.
Okay.
And I think the city was happy with that.
And some of the table.
The table, yeah. If you want to deal with that on block, that's fine. To reflect the dates of the updated bush fire management and emergency.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Yes, Member Premji, thank you. Speak on that.
Yes, please. The references, and prior to even receiving the submission from Mr. Foley, when I read this condition, the references to any recommendations made was confusing to me. It wasn't clear what recommendations are being referred to. As written, the original wording could be construed as requiring strict compliance with the submitted documents, and that has the potential to cause compliance issues given minor inconsequential refinements are often made at building permit and at implementation stage and after implementation and occupancy. So some of the plans by their nature as well require regular revision and updating over time as surrounding contexts evolve. It's more appropriate to allow minor changes to be made to the satisfaction of the city as and when need arises.
All right, thank you. Member Premji as the seconder. Did you want to speak on the amendment?
No, that's fine.
Are there any other speakers on the amendment? I think it's fairly straightforward. Okay. Did you want to? No. Okay, I'll put the amendment all in favour. That's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I'd seek to amend condition 5, which relates to the section 70A notification as suggested by the applicant, to change the requirement for the owner to prepare and lodge the notification to provision of consent instead. should the local government or other public authority wish to lodge the notification. This change would also then need to be accompanied by a new advice note that clarifies that this doesn't result in any obligation for the local government to prepare and lodge the notification. Any actions to occur should also occur before occupation or commencement rather than prior to a building permit. So that is the amendment I see.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Member Premji, thank you. Right.
Thank you. Briefly, the obligation to lodge a Section 70 notice on the title under the Transfer of Lands Act rests with the local government, not the applicant. This can only be executed by the local government if the landowner gives consent for the notice to be lodged. Furthermore, there is no obligation for the local government to lodge the notice even if consent is given. However, if the local government does proceed, the associated costs rest with the local government.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Member Premji, did you want to speak to that?
No, it's pretty self-explanatory. Thank you.
Any other speakers on that amendment? No? Okay, well, I'll put the amendment. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I seek to delete condition 6, which requires the retaining walls to be designed by a structural engineer prior to a building permit, and rather include that as an additional advice note.
Okay, seconder for that, please. Member Premji, thank you.
The reason is the condition itself has no planning relevance or basis in the planning framework. It's therefore more appropriate to be included as an advice note to inform the applicant of the city's expectations in this regard.
Further speakers on the deletion of 6 and it becoming an advice note?
Yeah.
No? Okay, thank you. I'll put that. All in favour? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Then I'd like to amend condition 8, which relates to colours and finishes, to add the words unless otherwise agreed by the City of Kalamunda at the end of the condition.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Mayor Thomas, thank you.
Thank you. Look, the reason for that this amendment is the additional wording clarifies that minor changes could be made to the colours and finishes during future maintenance or cosmetic upgrades without necessarily needing to go through a development approval process to get approval for the changes.
Thank you. Mayor Thomas has seconded. Do you want to speak on that?
Just to say that it's great to tidy up these things and make them really clear. So it's more than of that.
Thank you. Any further speakers on that amendment? No, I'll put the amendment. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Then I'd like to amend condition 11 to delete sub-points 4 and 5 as requested by the applicant.
4 and 5. Delete. Okay, I'm seeking a seconder for that. Member Premji, thank you.
Thank you. Look, the reasons, I agree with the reasons provided by the applicant. Part 4 of the condition requires the consent of a third party. It's not really appropriate as a planning condition, and part 5 of the condition is inconsistent with the Australian standard and tantamount to refusal, as the tree protection zone is 12 times the trunk diameter, and the effect of this is that most of the site, including a large portion of the build form and car park, will be in that zone. So it's not a practical condition to apply to this approval.
Right, thank you. Member Premji as seconder. Did you want to speak to that?
I just wanted to say I agree. It's a third party, so it should be cleared up.
Any further speakers on that amendment? No. I'll put that to the vote. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I seek to delete condition 12, which relates to the quality of fill to be used during construction, and rather include that as an additional advice note.
Seconder for that, please. Member Premji, thank you.
Thank you. As per the previous amendment in this regard, this condition doesn't have planning relevance or basis in the planning framework. More appropriate to include it as an advice note to set expectations in this regard for the applicant.
Any further speakers on that one? Yes, Councillor Ritchie.
It's more just a query. I do take Member Page's comments about being an advice note. but this area is a significant wetland too. There is underlying drainage going through there. And I just want to make sure that the advice note would have sufficient impetus, if you like, to ensure that no contaminated materials were moving through to that subground water that goes through Crumpet Creek, Poison Gully and so on, that move through that area. So I just wanted to make sure that the advice note would have that level of surety about that.
Yes, look, what's being proposed is that simply go in as an advice note as it is. I would probably defer to the officers here to see if there's a need for any additional words in that advice note.
Thank you for the question. I think that advice note is worded appropriately and would cover off needs. It is a standard condition that the city normally imposes. However, I do take about it not being part of the planning commission, and there are other legislative frameworks which would cover off them removing clean fill onto the site, which is not necessary for them.
Very hard to hear you, Mariana, but I guess from what I did hear that you're satisfied that those words will cover off the concerns raised by Councillor Ritchie.
Yes, correct. And that bringing on clean fill onto sites is covered by other legislative framework as well.
Yes, that's correct. All right, thank you. Back to you, Member Page. Nothing further to add, so I'll now put that amendment. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. We're nearly there, presiding member. I'd like to delete condition 16, which relates to the treatment of car parking areas. It's a duplication of condition 15.1.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Yes, thank you. Nima Premji.
Oh, it's simply a duplication, so required.
No further speakers on that one. I'll put that. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you.
And then the last one is to amend condition 29 to add the words unless otherwise approved by the City of Kalamunda at the end of the condition.
Is there a seconder for that? Mayor Thomas, thank you.
Thank you. The reason is the bushfire management plan is required to be updated and reviewed over time. It is therefore beneficial to allow those updates to be dealt with by the city administratively rather than requiring any update to those documents to come back to this panel each time an update is made.
Thank you. Any further speakers on that one? Mayor Thomas, did you second it? All right, thank you. Any further speakers? No, I'll put that amendment. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Still with
Thank
you.
you. That is it for amendments, presiding member. I'll talk to the substantive briefly. I will support the recommendation for approval. The city's report is comprehensive. It outlines a high level of compliance with relevant local planning policies. Save for a couple of deviations from the policy on family daycare and childcare premises. And one of those deviations, as a planning practitioner, I question the relevance of including in a policy in the first instance, and that is the distance between centres. And I speculate that that's probably why it was removed from the most recent planning bulletin, because I do question the relevance of that in a policy. The hours of operation proposed align with other similar applications that this panel deals with from time to time, and the measures to be implemented to manage the impact of any noise in the earlier hours, I think, are reasonable. Like I said, I'm concerned about a planning policy that arbitrarily imposes a spatial distribution, so I'm pleased to see that the city has applied some pragmatism in that regard. I note the objections received during consultation on the application, and I do note the submissions that we've heard today and the issues that have been raised in them. But I'm of the view that these have been responded to in the city's report, and some clarification of those issues today has given me some comfort. Particularly the issue about orderly and proper planning and the issue of the site falling within an area subject to future investigation under the applicable structure plan. The city's report outlines clearly, in my view, how the proposal meets the tests under the regulations for similar cases, because the proposal won't prejudice future planning or development potential of the area, and it's capable of being integrated to any future more detailed planning. Also note that the proposal complies with the build form requirements applicable to the site. It's been reviewed by the city's design review panel and considered to align with the design principles of State Planning Policy 7. Also includes measures to manage noise, rendering it compatible with the surrounding area. The parking provision is compliant, and on the issue of traffic, the traffic impact statement submitted and supported by the city's technical experts concludes the traffic generated by the centre will not have any undue impact on the surrounding road network. And we did hear from Mr. Gantos earlier that this particular road is sitting well within its carrying capacity. So there is nothing to base a refusal of this planning application on traffic grounds. The issue of oversupply of centres in this area is really not an issue that should be reasonably considered by this panel. The applicant would have done their due diligence on this before deciding to invest money into this process, and his report points out that there is a growing population in Forestfield, and the local planning strategy talks about an undersupply of centres, and I do take the points on board made earlier about occupancy levels, but they in themselves are not planning reasons to refuse a planning application. And we heard from the officers that in fact there is some review being done of their local planning strategy now, because it sounds like some of the data is actually lower than or some of the projections actually lower than currently included in that strategy. So it may well be that there is more of a demand in future. So I will be supporting on that basis. Thank you.
Member Page. Further speakers on the item? Yes, Member Premji.
Yes, thank you. Overall, I concur with all the comments made so far, and I support the recommendation for a childcare premises. The development has been well designed, which has been apparent from the design review panel's comments. It's well cited and thoroughly researched, and is generally compatible with the surrounding aesthetics. Also, the applicant has gone to a great extent to provide a traffic impact statement to assure that their overall impact on the surrounding network is kept to a minimum. Conditions imposed address issues that are raised, and the application is well within the planning framework. So I support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie, do you want to speak on this item?
No, I do have some concerns, but I accept that on planning grounds, the application has merit.
Okay, thank you very much. And I too support the proposal. I'm satisfied that the use can be considered under the urban development zone, and that it is compatible with the surrounding residential area. I note the concerns of the neighbours. However, in my view, I believe that there will be minimal impact on the amenity of the adjoining residential properties. This is reinforced by the supporting documents such as the acoustics report, the traffic impact statement, waste management plan, as well as the proposed conditions. The retention of many trees and the additional landscaping is noted and supported. I also note that the fire risk has been addressed and the plan supported by DFES. I agree with the arguments presented for the variations to local planning policy number 10. In my view, the built form will integrate well with the adjoining residential. Any concerns expressed through the consultation have been addressed or will be addressed through the commission, so I do support it. Back to you, Mayor Thomas, as the mover, to wind up the debate on this one.
I don't have anything to add, and I do want to thank the seconder for those amendments, which I think make it very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now put the amended substantive motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. So thank you to the councillors, Mayor Thomas, and the officers for your assistance with this one, and the presenters for coming in for this one, and we'll move on to the next item. So I'll just take a, get online, are they? Okay. So we'll just let the people move out if they want to. So welcome to President Coles and Councillor Bishop,
Thank you, Chair.
and to the officers as well. So we'll go back to declaration of due consideration. Members, have you considered all the documentation contained within Part C of the agenda and Part C related information? But please get a show of hands for confirmation of that. Very much. Is Councillor Bishop there? Where is he? Can you hear us, Councillor Bishop?
I certainly can. I'm just working on my video. Unfortunately, there's a few settings issues.
Just hold for a minute while you do that.
Excuse me, in relation to our deputations, I was wondering if it might be more efficient if we all gave our deputations and then sat collecting them.
That's what we'll do with you. Yeah. Yeah. It's just usually when there's public.
Understood. Thank you.
How are you going there, Councillor Bishop? Lost him.
Sorry, just still trying to find the appropriate setting. It may take me a little while, but I'll get it running as soon as possible.
Okay, well, while you're doing that, Councillor Bishop, I think we'll push on. So just going back to the declaration of due consideration, can you just confirm that you have considered all the material?
Yes, I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go on to disclosures of interest. President Coles and Councillor Bishop, was this matter considered at a council meeting or a briefing session?
No, it wasn't, Chair.
Okay, thank you. It's good. Are there any disclosures of interest? No. Councillor Bishop, no disclosure of interest?
No.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Well, move on then to the item itself. We've got 5 presenters and they're all part of the application at the applicant team. So what we'll do is we'll let the presentations run through and then we'll go to questions of the after that. So Bishop, are you quite happy with that at the moment? Hear them? See them?
Yes.
We've got as presenters, we've got Russell Delroy online there, Ben Norris, Craig Wallace, Peter Damon, and Murray Custleton. So how do you want to start from the top?
Russell.
Okay.
Yep.
3 minutes each, gentlemen. So I'll start with you, Russell Delroy.
Yep. Okay. Thanks for the opportunity. So I'm the principal of the applicant. Our business, Delroy Orchards, was established in 1987 in Pemberton, and it's a family-owned business growing fruit, supplying retailers across Australia. We grow and pack predominantly avocados and kiwi fruit. We also pack for some number of other growers through the southwest, and we also pack apples and stone fruit from some of those growers. About 80% of what we pack, we supply to eastern states retailers, which goes out predominantly by rail container through Kewdale. About 10% goes to WA retail distribution, and about 10% goes export. We've been operating out of a site in Donnybrook for the last 20 years, and it's a landlocked site at a fairly old facility, and we needed to upgrade the site to be somewhat more compliant with freshness automation. And we chose the Carnup site because our production's moving more towards automated, requires higher levels of skill, higher levels of IT, and to attract higher skilled workforce, we need to be closer to urban amenity to attract those sorts of people. Also, logistically, it's a lot closer to the railhead and the port for export and for distribution to Perth retail. And the rural side of Carnup will also enable the future expansion on that site further down the track into glasshouse production of produce for the Perth domestic market, which will be, ultimately adjoining the packing facility. The only other point I would make is that some of our major retail customers require our fresh produce to be delivered to them 363 days a year. There's only 2 days we don't do deliveries. And for that reason, we need to operate through public holidays to meet this requirement for fresh produce. That's all I had to say. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to
We have got no sound from the presenters. If you can hear me, presiding member.
carry on.
Technology.
The project positions Serpentine Jarrahdale Shire as the future home of one of the most advanced horticultural packing operations in Australia, something that's both economically valuable and reputationally desirable for any local government seeking high quality, forward-thinking growth projects in a sector that has historically lagged in its adoption of technological advancement. The location of the project offers several advantages. Being a facility with a heavy reliance on automation, the workforce that we require is very different to that required by a packing facility of old, with highly skilled plant technicians and robotics engineers taking the place of lower level labour roles traditionally filled with overseas workers. Being close to a larger urban population centre significantly broadens the availability of this workforce and improves long-term staffing stability. The project design encompasses the consolidation of our existing Hope Valley distribution and ripening centre within this facility and allows the dispatch of ripened fruit straight to retail customers from Kiwi Lane, ensuring we can deliver fresh produce to customer faster, improve efficiency and take more trucks off the road, whilst also retaining our current warehousing and ripening team who are largely based in the Kwinana and Rockingham areas. Importantly, most employees will naturally commute east along Carnup Road from these areas of higher urban density and turn left into Keeley Lane to access the property, minimising traffic impact waiting to turn from Carnup Road. The same locational advantages apply to freight carrying fresh produce that arrives to and from the facility. Given the site's proximity to Carnup Freeway, almost all truck movements will again travel in an easterly direction along Carnup Road before entering site, resulting in efficient and predictable freight routing with minimal interaction with local traffic. With infrastructure of this quality, we will at times wish to showcase the facility to industry. However, as a registered known consignor operation that inspects and dispatches fruit directly for export to overseas markets, maintaining security is paramount. This, coupled with modern OH&S obligations requiring us to maintain a controlled access environment, and as such, this is not a public-facing operation. And thus allowing public access or interaction within the site is neither feasible nor responsible. Constructing a high-quality fresh produce facility requires significant capital investment that is generally aimed at ensuring quality outcomes and that our produce gets a seat on the supermarket shelf, rather than facilitating a direct, tangible increase in financial return linked to the investment made. Construction costs have risen sharply over the past 7 years since planning began on this project, making all developments all the more difficult. In response, we've undertaken and continue to undertake exhaustive value engineering measures to refine construction methodologies and material choices, ensuring the project remains financially viable while still meeting the standards required. Thank you for the consideration of this project. We believe the development represents not only a major step forward for our company, but also a strategic and carefully planned investment that complements the existing zoning, promotes upskilling of the local workforce, and increases the economic input of the area.
Moving on to Craig Wallace.
Members, as you've heard, this is a good development. It's recommended for approval. My deputation is very narrow and primarily in relation to proposed condition 4, which relates to the provision of public art and a submission that it should be deleted. Condition 4 effectively requires two things: a provision of a % for public art to be determined prior to lodgement of a building permit. That provision isn't named, but it's reflecting the local planning policy would suggest an installation of $150,000 worth or a cash in lieu payment of the same amount. It also requires that art to be established prior to occupation. Initial observations suggest that timing is onerous, places a significant upfront financial burden on the proponent. The amount is arbitrary and derives solely from a mechanical provision in the local planning policy based on construction costs and not from a site-specific planning assessment of the need for public art. There are two reasons in our submission in relation to why that condition shouldn't be imposed. And the first one is that it's an invalid condition on the basis that there's no nexus and it's unreasonable. That's not a novel consideration in relation to public art, and indeed has been the subject of SAT determinations in the past. I don't want to focus on that at this point. I'd rather focus on the second element of our deputation, which is the available discretion to flexibly apply that policy. As you will be aware, the derivation, the rationale for this condition is not in the scheme, it's in the local planning policy 1.6. The local planning policy is a due regard document. We all know what that means. It's not it's not a binding document. Those types of policies guide discretion. They don't dictate outcomes, particularly where there's cogent reasons to depart. My submission is that there are cogent reasons to depart, and Mr. Castleton will advance on that. But as an observation, one of the first reasons is that there's no articulated planning justification for the condition. The RAR itself is silent on the need for public art other than a reference to the local planning policy. It's disproportionate in terms of its focus on monetary contributions. As you'll be aware, this is a typical rural building set back from the Carnup Road in an area that is proposed to be landscaped to Carnup Road, and ignoring the nature of traffic on Carnup Road. The condition instead prioritises a fixed dollar amount rather than looking at planning merit type consideration. As you would have heard, the cost of construction of this type of building is extraordinary due to the technical nature of the building itself. As a consequence, the resulting contribution is an anomaly of $150,000 in its context. there's no meaningful consideration of who benefits and whether that benefit is real or meaningful. What that results in is a commercial unreasonableness, particularly when you consider the other costly construction conditions primarily relating to road upgrades. The timing is inappropriate, requiring compliance before a building permit. That's unnecessary, and we'll ask you to carefully consider that. And more fundamentally, the provision of a public art in this location is incongruous with its rural context. The land is zoned rural. This is an industry rural type development. Public art is ordinarily associated with urban centres, civic spaces, and areas of high pedestrian traffic. This is not it. It is in fact a low activity rural landscape. And as far as I'm aware, there's no other examples of public art along Carnut Road for rural development. So in conclusion, I'd respectfully request that that condition 4 be deleted on the basis it delivers no meaningful planning benefit, that it be deleted. That said, if you consider it necessary for public art to be considered, we would also ask you to consider your discretion to exercise how much that contribution should be and when it should be imposed, so that it genuinely reflects the nature of the development, rural context, and the purpose of the local planning policy pertaining to public art.
Thank you. Peter Damon.
Oh, thank you. Good morning. Likewise, my deputation is quite narrow. It relates to condition 6 and only part of condition 6. I'm an independent consultant, specialises in traffic engineering and road safety. And in a previous capacity, my team wrote the national guidelines that were used by the Shire to assess the requirements for upgrades to Keeley Lane and Carnut Road for this development. So I was asked to assess the access requirements on Carnut Road to ensure a safe and effective outcome. And I'd like to first say I concur with the Shire's approach in terms of the majority of the site access requirements. There's only one that I'm questioning and suggesting a different approach, and that is the right turn facility from the east turning into the site. So that's the one which I'll focus on. Now, you've heard, I think, now this proposed fruit packing facility is going to be quite different from what we've seen in the past, and consequently, we forecast it's going to generate quite low traffic volumes. You've heard about robotics and automation, no public access. Also, there's many of the workers on site will be overseas seasonal fruit handlers that will not impose traffic movements on the east of Carnut Road. And in fact, the truck movements entering the site at Keeley Lane will largely be from the west, and in any case, they'll be quite low during busy periods on Carnut Road. The large majority of traffic is forecast to move to and from the west on Carnut Road, as you've heard, particularly to and from the Kwinana Freeway, which is what you'd expect. Frequency and scale of movements turning right into the site from the east on Carnut Road, particularly truck movements, is going to be very low. We're talking about less than one vehicle every 10 minutes in the peak hour in the future. And in fact, that'll be much less in terms of trucks. So we're just talking about 1 or 2 trucks an hour. And that's in the peak. And during the day, at other times, it'll be less than that. So I assess the requirements on a full range of different traffic scenarios in terms of growth, including those presented to us by the Shire. And I consider that the information used was helpful, but that some of the information that the Shire's used to base its assumptions on were invalid. In particular, some of the traffic count information that they collected was done at a time which artificially elevated the traffic levels on Carnut Road because there was road closures on adjacent roads. And that's consequently overstated a lot of the assumptions that they've had. So in from my assumption, my position is that invalidates some of that analysis. Nonetheless, I've explored the future traffic of the intersection. Despite that, there's certainly sufficient available site distance at this location. It exceeds the minimum requirements. The road geometry is safe and suitable. There's no significant history of crashes in the last 5 years within several kilometres of the proposed Keeley Lane intersection. And while there have been clusters of crashes elsewhere on Carnut Road at high risk locations, That's kilometres away, and that's due to other features like poor geometry. So that doesn't apply here. In fact, the access is a very suitable location for an access point to the site. So my assessment really indicates that under none of the scenarios we investigated is a right-turning channelization facility warranted. My assessment is that a simple right-turn treatment, similar to that proposed by the Shire for the other access point from the site, is sufficient to provide a safe means of access in and out of the site. That would provide localised flaring and widening of the pavements at the junction to ensure safety, and it would also minimise the cost of development because the channelized treatment is going to be about $500,000. So it's a substantial impost on the development. So my advice or request to the panel is that the CHR treatment that's listed under condition 6 is unnecessary under the circumstances, and that consideration should be given to changing that condition to a simple right turn, an SR treatment for traffic turning right into the site from the east, and that would provide a safe and more appropriate form of intersection treatment for the development. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the panel and to the Shire's officers for working closely with us on this development application. We're generally happy with the approval recommendation and proposed conditions, with the exception of conditions 3, 4, 6 and 15. In our view, condition 3 should be amended to remove the operation restriction on public holidays. Condition 4 should be deleted to remove the requirement for a public art contribution. Condition 6 should be amended to require auxiliary left lane and simple right turn treatments only at the intersection of Carnut Road and Keeley Lane. And condition 15 requires a minor change to more accurately describe the proposed development. Modifications to condition 3 and condition 15 were previously agreed via email with the assessing officer at the Shire. Upon release of the responsible authority report, it became apparent that the conditions had reverted to their initially proposed draft wording. When this issue was raised with the Shire, the advice back from the Shire's Director of Development Services was that the restriction was added back into condition 3 based on his final review of the proposal due to amenity considerations, but that there were no issues with the proposed modifications to condition 15. In respect to condition 3, it is essential that the business be permitted to operate on public holidays. This is because the fresh produce needs to be picked, processed and distributed to customers at the appropriate time to meet the needs and expectations of consumers. In this regard, it is noted that many customers, including the major supermarket chains, both operate and receive deliveries of fresh produce on public holidays. The assertions made in respect to amenity impacts are also not justified given the supporting acoustic and other assessments and the development context. There's no trigger to say that operating on public holidays is an issue. Condition 4 relating to the provision of public art should be deleted. This is on the basis that the proposed industry rural development in a rural zone lacks public spaces or access, making public art contributions unjustified and ineffective. There is also no planning nexus between public art and a secure agricultural processing facility with the large building setbacks from Carnut Road at around 100 metres and the rural setting offering minimal visibility or engagement. The planning policy objectives cannot be achieved on site, and the Shire's out-of-date strategy does not identify such locations as being suitable for public art. A cash in lieu contribution would not benefit the site or locality, and the amount based on construction cost is disproportionate given other obligations. In conclusion, when applied to this development, the condition is contextually not justified, and planning policy allows discretion with clear reasons for departure in this case. Now, I guess I would make the point, I don't think I've ever asked for a public art condition to be removed from an officer recommendation before a development assessment panel before, but I think this one ticks the boxes for it not to be applied. And I think the logic and justification for that would also be consistent with the SAT determination that was made in 2018. And I'd be happy to expand on that if the panel would like me to do so. In respect to condition 6, level 5 design have concluded that amendments to the Carnut Road and Keeley Lane intersection upgrade requirements are justified because when assessed against any relevant or applicable standard, the minimal traffic generated by the proposal coupled with predominant access from the west ensures that proportionate auxiliary, got it right that time, auxiliary left turn and simple right turn treatments will safely accommodate the development without the need for unnecessary or oversized intersection upgrades. I thank you for taking the time to listen to our deputations, and we would be pleased to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much. Panel members, questions of the presenters. Member Page, I think.
Just one. It's just a point of clarification for me. You've requested an amendment to condition 6. There's a lot of words in there, but when I review what the change is actually, what change you're actually asking for, you're asking to replace the wording channelized right turn with the wording simple right turn. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Further questions of the Member Premji.
Yes, just the hours of operation. Your current operation, what hours do they operate? Well, is it?
Current operation operates from 5 a.m. through till 10 p.m. to midnight. The new facility's got significantly higher throughput capacity and reduced operating hours.
How many days? 7 days or
7
public
days.
holidays? Public
7
holidays?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
No, was the SAT matter you're referring to, was that the Kalamunda?
No, it was one in the city of Swan. So it was it's a BGC asphalt plant decision, which was BGC Australia Proprietary Limited versus the Metro East Joint Development Assessment Panel. I couldn't find the decision number, possibly because it's a bit old, but the decision is from September 2018.
It's a decision of member Eddie. It is unreported, unfortunately. There's a bit of it's almost mythological in the legal sense, but it does exist. And it is on all fours with the position that we've got here. There was effectively an application for a review of a condition imposing a public art contribution. That public art contribution was derived from a local planning policy. Member Eddie went through the normal testing in Tenwood, and from memory, in terms of her findings, it was that there was no nexus, and as a consequence, unreasonably imposed. She also suggested that the understanding whether or not there's a nexus for public art to a particular development isn't cured by the simple making of a local planning policy. It's still a planning merits assessment. So it is on all fours. It is an example. It is mythological, but hence the reason why I suggested that we might go think positively in terms of a flexible assessment of that local planning policy.
Okay, thank you.
It's quite a good concluding comment. Since a BGC decision is highly relevant if the development has limited public interface and the authority can't articulate a clear site-specific nexus between the project's impacts and the need for public art, then the condition is on shaky ground. Is the term that was used.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, questions?
Nothing from me, thanks.
Who had the hand up? No one.
Yeah, through the chair, President Coles here. I've got a couple of questions, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so my concern really is in relation to condition 6 and the access right-hand turn into Keeley Lane from the east. I guess I know that road very well, and probably the number one issue for us in the Shire is the road conditions and safety of our roads. I guess my concern is the Shire has spent some money recently upgrading Yangetti Road, which is just to the east, about 200 metres to the east. There is a crest there, and I'm concerned about if condition 6 was to be amended as explained, what does that mean for the safety, considering that there is that crest about 200 metres to the east? I'm not sure whether the traffic expert can talk to that or whether someone from the Shire can talk to that, but that's my real concern as the Shire President.
Thank you. We'll get a comment from the applicant, and then after all the questions of the applicant, we'll go to the Shire officers for questions. So,
thank you, Chair.
So just in response to the panel, we're aware of that issue and the vertical curve there, or the increase in the elevation in Yangetti Road. we investigate the available site distance, and it meets the requirements for stopping site distance at the intersection, and it meets the requirements for safe intersection site distance. Basically it meets the normal guideline and standards that we would accept in Australia and that main roads would accept. On top of that, because the exposure level, i.e. the traffic volumes are very low, turning in from the east, we're talking about very few vehicles, and in particular very few trucks. That also affects the determination of risk. And so we assess it as being unnecessary in this instance to have a substantial channelization facility there, and that a lesser facility, still an upgrade on what there is now, but a lesser facility was sufficient, and that being a simple right turn.
Just as a follow-up to that question, always worries me when we have two engineers with two different views.
Yeah, sure.
Is it simply the problem with the data that's causing two different views?
Being that my team developed the methodologies around this, what I can say is that this road is got a 100-kilometre speed environment, but we're using an urban methodology to apply to it because the area is developing in that sense over time. And so because the traffic volumes are so low, it's very sensitive. And so, we've had updated information from the applicant, which we're quite confident is correct based on what they're planning to do with the site, which suggests that the volumes are actually much lower. And it's actually the turning volumes coming to the site, which is the critical factor, not the traffic on Carnup Road. So the traffic on Carnup Road, the growth could be higher than what we're saying. It still wouldn't be the determining factor here. It's the number of vehicles turning right into the site. Because that's 5 vehicles an hour, it's so low, it's really a very low risk.
Thank you. Yeah. Further questions of the councillors? Right, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Move to the Andrew Trossick, is it? And online, where are you, gentlemen? There you are. Got Remy Van Leeuwen and Marius Lagrange. Do you want to make any brief comments on what you've heard so far, or just happy to take questions?
I'm in your hands. I do have some brief notes, run through if that assisted, or if the questions are probably going to be to those issues.
Probably would, I'd imagine. So go to questions. And other questions of the officers? Member Page.
Thank you. So just on condition 3 and the operating hours, and I guess I just wanted to test. The applicant suggested that there had been agreement at officer level to perhaps delete that condition, but the director then felt that there were amenity impacts that justified retention of that. So I just want to test what specifically are those amenity impacts that are of concern, and how would the amenity impacts on public holidays be different to a Sunday, for example?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So certainly when I finalised the RAR, I did look to retain the public holiday exemption. Our rural localities do contain a whole range of, properties. There are some people who see themselves as hobby farmers, enthusiasts. They're not all out, particularly in this area. I wouldn't describe them as very commercial enterprise scale farms where you would expect a high degree of rural operations to be occurring throughout the year. Increasingly, that level of agricultural intensity is becoming less and less common in our Shire, just in terms of the nature of the changes in agriculture. So the presence of lifestyle properties kind of elevates in our mind just the need to be sort of drawing a reasonable level of protection on amenity. So whilst we're comfortable with the 7-day-a-week operation, we did feel that public holiday exemption, or not allowing it to be operating on public holidays, would be commensurate with the reasonable expectations of amenity in that area. You do noticeably see a decrease in traffic on a public holiday in particularly heavies in our Shire, particularly like the sand trucks and other large agricultural vehicles. So that was predominantly the driver for retaining that limitation. I certainly understand and appreciate the views that have been expressed here that do recognise a differing of opinion, and I guess certainly in panel's hands that was the planning concern.
Can we talk about now public art? And to some degree, I understand why the Shire would put the condition in, right? There's a policy, and it's sometimes difficult to justify why you are happy to apply it in some cases and not others. So I understand why, as a general rule, you would apply the condition. But I guess I want to test with you a little bit what actual benefit is there in requiring public art in the rural zone? And have you placed public art requirements on other development in the rural zone?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So our local planning policy 1.6 doesn't limit itself to urban or commercial or mixed use zones. It is intended to apply Shire-wide in those sort of, particularly our rural and industrial contexts, which were probably the major contexts that exist outside our urban areas. I think public art has more of a sort of a way of acting as a bit of a gateway announcement, or a sort of landscape transition enhancement announcement, as a way of trying to soften, I guess, what we still consider as a rural industry, but trying to soften the impact of that development within what is still very much a natural landscape setting. So that to me is the primary planning benefit, that it will, I guess, provide another way or another layer in which to sort of try to nest this development within the landscape that it's placed. But my other notes, on that was, I guess, all of our percent for art contributions ultimately do recognise public interface. So almost all of our percent for art conditions get applied on what are private developments at the end of the day, where not the public can't necessarily just go and enter into them or engage with them. They might be a range of mixed-use developments, they might be private commercial or office developments. Granted, some might have more customer, but it's always treated at that public interface. So the issue about like the BGC case, it's certainly familiar with that case and familiar with the arguments made. We sort of see Carnup Road and proximity of this site in terms of its public visibility along a major east-west corridor that connects Freeway with Southwest Highway, that there is a planning purpose to play in terms of a bit of a gateway or landscape element for the development.
So just to follow up on that, and I understand why in industrial areas public art is appropriate to soften the impact. You talked about softening the impact on the natural landscape setting, but for public art to actually be public art, it needs to be visible. Wouldn't that in itself impact on the natural landscape setting?
Yeah, I definitely would represent an impact. I guess something that art can speak a lot of words in quite sort of subtle and small ways is probably the way in which art can be quite efficient in giving some kind of creative spin on, something around, avocado and kiwi fruit. That could be quite a nice kind of way of, being sort of something that is just a little bit different. That tries to sort of, I guess, provide a very modest, contribution back to the overall locality. But I certainly acknowledge what I've heard today. Just sort of maybe a plot looking at it from slightly different perspectives.
Hearing what we've heard today about that intersection treatment and the proposal for the amended treatment, has that changed your views in any way?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I would really warrant some careful consideration of the intersection. I'm genuinely worried by the to remove the channelized right turn movement for westbound traffic. President Coles did mention, essentially we've got Keeley Lane, 12 metres, AHD, we've got the crest at 18.5 metres, 200 metres along, and then another 200 metres past that is Yangetti Road. So we actually had to upgrade Yangetti Road because trucks were flying over the crest and being met by a car or other vehicle wanting to turn right at a basic right turn movement southbound into Yangetti Road. So reverse that, vehicles, trucks, sand trucks or whatever will be coming westbound over that same crest, and then our concern is being met with cars or other vehicles wanting to now turn right into Keeley Lane. Currently, no one really turns right into Keeley Lane except there's one or two farming, 3 or 4 farming properties along Keeley Lane. So that right channelized movement is, in my mind, is addressing an issue we were sort of only had to deal with as a council about 5 years ago in terms of the risk of the high-speed environment, trucks travelling, getting over a crest and needing to make a quick decision to avoid a rear end collision. So it is at the threshold. It's 200 metres. It's right at the threshold. I think that the applicant did mention 250 metres. The top of the crest is right at 200 metres. So it's sort of, for our mind, the level of vehicle volumes along Carnup Road. It's difficult to say only vehicles will be travelling from Kwinana Freeway. Southwest Highway does appear to connect into the more southern interior where there's a lot of orcharding happening. So it'd be hard to address that by way of condition limiting only truck access from a direction from the freeway. So that environment really does worry the Shire in terms of the speed limit that Main Roads have said steadfastly they're going to retain. They're not going to drop that below 100.
Just to follow up then, do you have any idea about the cost differential between the two treatments?
Yeah, the design for a channelized right, I guess a left with an auxiliary left, I think the cost of that is not going to be a small amount, if I'm going to be honest. I suspect a similar treatment that was performed along Cargodditch Road in recent memory was between sort of $750,000 and $1 million. And that was in front of a place of public worship where we had to do the applicant had to undertake a similar upgrade due to the speed limit and the risk of those rear ends. So I think knowing the cost of that similar road environment, I think it would be circa $1 million.
Just putting the auxiliary lane aside, and we just talk about the channelized right. Is that simply a widening of the pavement and some paintwork?
Yeah, that's essentially widening on both sides, tapers, some surface relocations, possibly with Western Power, depending on distances. The Yangetti Road upgrade that was done about 5 years ago So costs back in 5 years ago, that was $240,000. That included essentially just an auxiliary right turn, so essentially a widening, not the construction of an actual turning pocket. So that was a project the Shire funded. It's also helping.
Can I just check? So those two examples you've given us with place of worship, public worship, and this one, can you comment very briefly for me on the driver? How different is the demand or the need for this treatment, for this development versus a place of public worship?
Yeah, the place of public worship on Cargottich Road was capped at a maximum of 500 people, and it was sort of in a 100-kilometre road environment. So similar concerns about particularly peak time, say on a Sunday or a Friday evening, the risk of sort of rear end crashes if there was going to be a basic right turn movement only. The graph that we've sort of included our senior traffic engineer who spent a lot of time on this proposal that he included on page 31 of the agenda does consider the turning movements, whilst the y-axis, the turning movements in peak hours of 20 doesn't sound significant. The through movements really push it into that channelized right, auxiliary left trigger. It's just a way in which the actual design speed at 100 kilometres an hour is dictating that as the preferred intersection methodology. So certainly, you know, a place of public worship receiving 500 worshippers somewhat probably would be further off the page in this same graph, but it would still be in that section that we've got in blue to the upper right.
Okay, and just the last thing on the intersection. So what in your view creates the safety issue? Is it the speed of trucks coming over that rise and not being able to stop, or is it the visibility? So what I'm trying to get my head around is if you've got large trucks trying to turn right into this development, you'll see them as soon as you come over the rise. A small car for a place of public worship might be more difficult to see. So is it a visibility issue as you come over, or is it a speed issue, or what is it in your view that creates the safety issue?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The main concern that we are seeing across a lot of across our east-west roads of Thomas Road, Mundajon Road and Carnot Road is the level of freight traffic, and not so much restricted access vehicles, but usually 19 metre as of right sand trucks, which with their payload going along at 100 k's an hour. So the principal concern is the risk of that vehicle type not being able to address a safe braking or other solution, particularly as they're heading westbound. So coming from the east heading west, whether or not they're associated with the development, the risk that the development has in terms of any vehicle that is potentially waiting to turn into the development utilising Keeley Lane. So it's very much an almost exact repeat of what Yangetti Road used to be, just to 400 metres to the east of Keeley Lane. Okay.
Does that make a difference if it's only the 5 trucks per hour?
Because it's sort of the existing environment, so they may not necessarily be associated with the development, but I guess we've sort of modelled the turning movement of potentially 20 turning vehicles into the development at peak times, sort of exceeding 20 turning movements into the vehicle at peak times. That was predominantly the worry. So whether they're as of right or passenger vehicles or worker vehicles or commercial vehicles, if they're sitting there, the risk is that there's going to be greater likelihood of a need to now have to perform a braking sort of solution in area of road that we do feel is an area which has raised some safety concerns.
One last question, doesn't relate to intersection treatments. Can I just check why you consider condition 9, requiring connection to effluent disposal system, to be a planning condition?
Yeah, thank you for the question. As you can expect, all of the Shire outside life is on septic, so predominantly the state planning policy for the Peel Harvey and the state planning policy, the new state planning policy 2.9, which basically envelopes in the Peel Harvey, does reference the need for effluent disposal to be suitably demonstrated. I guess the planning basis for it predominantly the relevance of the state planning policies, which do feature a large amount of the officer time in trying to get that information sort of upfront, or if we're confident, we can get it conditioned.
From me, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Yes, Member Premji.
Yes, I'll just go straight to condition 6. In all this debate, I couldn't read any material if there has been any consultation with Main Roads, given that they control the speeds.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I do actually address that in the report. We have already asked Main Roads to look at speed along Carnup Road. So they have advised us as part of our 2023 speed review. So on the page, I guess 37 of the agenda, or what's marked as page 34, sort of Main Roads, based on its regional distribution function, Main Roads have not supported a reduction in the volume of the speed limit along Carnup Road. So they particularly advise that they won't be entertaining any sort of sectional speed limits along our major regional distributor roads, because of just their perspective that it's not a safe or efficient way of controlling vehicle speed. So that's been the position that, unfortunately, that we've taken this. Yeah.
So have you also, because I haven't seen any correspondence or any of that consultation evidence here, have you, the Shire has consulted Main Roads with regard to the treatment at that particular intersection, that what would be acceptable given it's a regional distributor?
It is still a local government road. So we're responsible for the road. The Main Roads would ultimately have like the signs and lines regulatory responsibility. So we would engage them, but we wouldn't seek their consent or otherwise to be upgrading an intersection based on a local government road.
Okay. The other question I have, you've mentioned that you've already done treatments at the place of worship and down further south. Now, in all those treatments, you would have gone to the federal black spot treatment, roads to recovery, those sorts of programs, or has the Shire actually funded that out of their own revenue?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the place of public worship development approval put in that entire need and nexus on the developer to perform those road upgrades. So there wasn't any Shire contribution towards that project. Often the need and nexus question, and is it reasonable? Does it have a planning purpose? That is, I guess, what we've stressed in the report, that we believe that it is specifically the development that is triggering the road upgrade requirement is precipitating that condition. So we wouldn't ordinarily then go and start trying to pursue grants that are available, because the grants for black spots, the grants for road rehabilitation are typically, I guess, somewhat retrospective or past looking, particularly black spot, and Keely Lane just doesn't have really any development along it at the moment, apart from a couple of homes, so it doesn't represent a serious issue at this moment, and that's, I guess, what we're saying changes with the development application.
Right, so the channelized right-hand turn, the channelized is the one that the Shire officers and the engineers consider the safest treatment for that particular intersection.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Thanks.
Andrew, I want to ask Peter a similar question to this, but it seems to me we've got two engineers using the same data and coming to a different conclusion. And I think the answer was around, well, Shire uses an urban setting and Peter's used a rural setting. And so how can we arrive at different solutions for the same problem using engineering standards?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Our assessment is predominantly the consideration of traffic volumes. If I recall, there is a perspective that the traffic volumes are inflated, which we've addressed in the report insofar that we don't believe we've used inflated volumes. The volumes inflated or whatever are, I guess, the volumes that we're seeing. They're supported by actual traffic data that's been collected. We've sort of got that on page 29. Also looking at the main roads data set that is projecting increasing traffic volumes. They are ultimately the thing that are driving in conjunction with the traffic speed. It's those traffic volumes which are driving the issue that we're seeing. Certainly Mundajong Road was closed for a period during 2025. Because I'm just trying to contemplate how Carnut Road would have been inflated significantly as a result of Mundajong Road being closed. Applicants are of the view that it has had an impact. It's just a really difficult situation to accept that it's inflated directly without evidence to maybe a contrary traffic count performed when Mundajong Road had have reopened. If the applicant could have undertaken that may have swayed my views, but it's the data that we've got do show year on year it's increasing, and main roads are looking to future increases commensurate with development of locality. If
you discounted the figures you've got to accommodate some additional traffic as a result of the Mundajong Road closure, discounted those figures, would you still come to the same conclusion, do you think, or not?
It is, I do agree, it's very close to the threshold. I do agree with that. I think I'll use that example of the figure 23. The yellow dot is, the yellow area is close to the blue line. It's very close. I do agree with that. It's just, it's tipped it over. The reality that we're seeing is people, particularly a mix of trucks, a lot of sand trucks utilising Carnut Road associated with sand quarrying activities in the city of Rockingham, and servicing our urban growth in the Tonkin Highway project. So there'll be some life on that, no doubt, but it's expected, we're still going to sort of see this head growth year on year. But yeah, certainly understand, and the figure does show it's very close. Growth, if no growth was projected, the risk, but I think with the projected growth, that's what pushed us into the channelized right.
Okay, thank you. Further questions?
Through the chair, if I could,
Yes.
as long as you can hear me, I just put a headset on. Again, my concerns have probably been echoed by yourself, Chair, and the other members. Again, I'm concerned about this traffic volume. We've got one report saying traffic is low. I think I wrote down the actual quote, traffic volume is low. We've got the Shire saying the traffic volume isn't low. Notwithstanding the question you've already asked, Mr. Chair, how do we, I guess, determine something when there's such a discrepancy in the traffic volume? Perhaps I could ask the question to the Director, Mr. Trossick, in terms of, you talked about growth, Mr. Trossick. Is there anything further in terms of growth, southern part of the Shire, and that traffic volume? I guess for me, that's the real concern I have, is that condition 6. I don't know if you can add anything more, Director.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. President. I think the growth is what our table on page 29 shows. It's just really hard I don't have evidence to be able to prove or disprove the assertion about the impact of the Mundajong Road closure. Apart from rerunning a road count through a reasonably suitable time frame to get a reasonable capture of the new traffic environment, it's hard to actually say or agree that it would be different to what the table is showing us. I feel that the growth in the general area, Baldivis, coupled with the growth in the Shire, does see Carnot Road featuring as a important regional distributor that will continue to attract traffic. Whether the 2025 figures have essentially presented figures that we may reach in 2027, because there was a period of time where Mundajong Road is closed, it's hard to sort of agree with that.
Through the chair, can I ask a follow-up question in regards to that? The Tonkin Highway has well and truly started construction, or that's the extension. In your expertise, Director, what will that mean in terms of Carnot Road? And obviously, I'm asking you to make an assessment here, but Tonkin Highway coming all the way down to Southwest Highway in the vicinity of Jarrahdale Road, what would that do to traffic volumes along Carnot Road?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I did think about this when I did hear the proponent talking about a lot of their eastern state customers. So Westport has sort of very much firmed that Kewdale Forestfield sort of intermodal kind of facility as being where they're seeing the future of our interstate train and truck haulage emanating from. So I kind of feel as though Carnot Road would lend a really nice connection, say from a development like this development. If it was needing to get up to Kewdale, it would seem there would be some sort of desire possibly to head east along Carnot Road to Southwest Highway, north along Southwest Highway, and then you hit the new Tonkin Highway, which joins Southwest Highway just a few kilometres to the north at Jarrahdale Road. So comparing that to circling back onto the Kwinana Freeway, circling back up to Mundajong Road, then heading west to join the Tonkin Highway at Mundajong Road. So I kind of think that it could see Carnot Road to Southwest Highway as being a more desirable.
Further questions?
No, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bishop, no questions? Okay, all right. Thank you very much to Andrew. Move to the item. a recommendation for approval with a number of conditions. Seeking a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Is there a mover for that? Member Page. Is there a seconder for that? Member Premji. Thank you. Member Page.
Thank you, presiding member. Before I talk to the substantive motion, I would like to move a few amendments.
By all means.
I would like to amend condition 3, which relates to operating hours, to remove the wording Monday to Sunday and not at all public holidays.
I want to get Monday to Sunday as well. Okay. So you're taking out Monday to Sunday as well?
Yes, because there's no need for Monday to Sunday if it's every day.
All right. Is there a seconder for that? Member Premji, thank you.
Thank you, presiding member. Look, I do note the director's comments about public holidays and people residing in the area and the difference that might make to them. When I weigh up the number of public holidays a year versus the operational impact on a business like this, and arguably, in my mind, I think the impact on a public holiday is not that different to a Sunday. So if we're happy to let this business operate on a Sunday, then surely the impact isn't arguably as bad as to warrant prohibiting it on a public holiday. It just doesn't stack up for me to restrict the operations on a public holiday. So I think we should delete the condition and allow them to operate as they currently do.
Thank you. Member Premji has seconded. Do you wish to speak? Can't hear.
Yes, I agree with the reasoning, and I agree with a Monday to Sunday, regardless of whether it's public holiday or not, the operation should be permitted. Thank you.
Okay. Are there further speakers on this amendment? No. Okay. I'll put that to the vote. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Back to you, Member Page.
I then seek to delete condition 4 relating to public art.
Okay. I'll seek a seconder for that. Member Premji, thank you.
Look, I, as I said earlier, I understand why the Shire would put the condition on the in the recommendation. They have applied in their policy the requirement for public art across the board. In my mind, I think that policy should be more nuanced to look at where public art is actually of greatest benefit. And I certainly don't think for something like this that there's planning rationale for public art to be a mandatory requirement for a property located within the rural zone. I think public art is ordinarily associated with more active urban industrial settings for the reason that the director mentioned is to soften the impact of that development. I don't think there's a need to soften the visual impact of this development, and I just don't think that it's a reasonable requirement in this case.
Member Premji as seconder.
Yes, I agree. I travel that road, all those roads at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. So I have a complete understanding. Given the sight lines, I don't think it is having public art there would be of adding any value to the amenities. Thank you.
Further speakers on this amendment? No? Okay, I too support the amendment. I'm not sure if you put it on site, you can still call it public art. So, and I agree with the comments made by the mover for this amendment that this policy needs to be looked at each time or applied for each site. So it's site specific rather than just saying it's public art or across the board. Back to you to wind up the debate on that. Now I'll put that amendment. All in favour? That's unanimous. So thank you. Back to you, Paige.
I might suggest an amendment just so that we can discuss it in relation to condition 6. I suggest consideration of an amendment that adds some wording to the first dot point. And that wording, so the intersection of Carnap Road and Keeley Lane is to have an auxiliary left lane and channelized right turn intersection treatment, or an alternative treatment that increases the safety of the right turn movement with the agreement or to the satisfaction of the Shire of Serpentine, Jarrahdale.
Or an alternative treatment
that increases the safety of the right turn movement. The satisfaction of the Shire.
Yep. Satisfaction. Okay. Is there a seconder for that?
Through the chair, can I just ask a question in regards to that?
You may.
Thank you, through the chair, to Member Page, who's just moved that amendment. I guess pragmatically that makes sense, but I don't want to enter the debate. I'm trying to phrase this as a question. We've just heard the Shire explain that they seem to think the only option is as per their condition. I'm trying to phrase it as a question, sorry, Chair, but I guess I'm asking, will this change the outcome, if that makes sense? I hear what you're trying to say, Member Page, but I'm just trying to get my head around the understanding behind it.
So I'm happy to talk to this.
Yeah, we'll get a seconder. I'll second it.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess the Shire's officers have a firm view that the safest way of managing access into the site is via the channelized right turn. But I'm also hearing commentary about close to thresholds and so on. So yes, the safest would be the channelized right turn, but if we are arguing about data and we're sitting close to thresholds and some of the assumptions that were used in the Shire's response have been questioned, I am curious as to whether there might be an alternative treatment that doesn't cost $1 million. So what? This doesn't make either party happy, by the way, I assume that, but what this does is it allows, rather than deferring this application and then bringing it back, it allows the Shire's engineers and the applicant's engineers to explore the potential, and they may already have done this, in which case I'm sure we'll hear back from them, but to explore whether or not we have to go all the way to the channelized right turn or whether there's an alternative treatment. And it may well be that in further discussion with the Shire, in further analysis of the data, the channelized right turn may not be required. So I'm hoping that that conversation can be had. It just creates some flexibility to work this out without having coming back. It may not be. I admit it's not the best wording of a planning condition because it does leave some uncertainty here, but it does create the ability for them to have the conversation rather than compelling them now to spend $1 million or saying we're happy with the amended wording that they've suggested and we go ahead with that. So if this amendment is lost, then happy to hear whether there's a subsequent amendment to change the wording as per the applicant's wording. That's really the reason for my amendment.
As seconder, I agree entirely. I think there is sufficient certainty around this amendment in that there are probably going to be one of two solutions that come out of this process. But as we've had through the questioning, there is quite a difference. Well, they've got same data, but getting a different solution. I think this is an opportunity for them to get together and come up with an agreed solution, whether it is the channelized right turn or the simple right turn or whatever
else
solution. But I think this is an opportunity to come to a point where everyone agrees that's a safe solution. Yes, Member Premji.
Given that and the reasoning behind it, I'm quite happy with it. But I would then say in condition 6, where you've got prior to the lodgement of a building permit, a 15% design. I would rather it be a 30% design to ensure that at least the applicant and the Shire do actually sit down and come to a conclusion, a satisfied conclusion. And I think it is important that be put in there, because from an engineering perspective, there could be other alternatives that could be done at 15 that can, between 15 and 30 can change. So I just want to make sure that it is addressed, and given the reasoning, I'm happy with it. However, it needs to be substantial before it is approved.
I'm happy with that, given there will be many conversations and discussions that occur before we hit to 30%. So it's not committing 30% without that prior conversation and analysis. So I'd be happy to leave that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just on that, through the through the chair, sorry to ask another question, and maybe yourself or Member Page could answer it. What Member Perengi just said about 30%, is that enough, or do we need to put a time limit on it in terms of, so there's some certainty for the applicant? Because what we don't want
before.
There is a time.
It's prior
to the lodgement of a building permit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry for the silly question.
That's all right. It's okay. So, and I've agreed to the change to 30%. So, are there any other speakers on this amendment? Okay.
I think your councillor Bishop.
Sorry.
Yes,
if I may, through the chair, just recognising that the positions of the applicant and the Shire are currently at polar opposites. Is there any possibility of getting an indication from either party as to what a prospective middle ground might look like?
I think that would be really difficult at this stage. I think they need to have that discussion. They need to agree firstly on the data that they've collected, and out of that would come a solution, I'm sure. But I think we'd be asking them to debate between themselves now on what it might look like.
No worries, thank you.
Okay. All right, there's no further debate on that. I'll put that amendment. All in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Still with you, Member Page.
Thank you, Presiding Member. And then I'd like to amend condition 15 to replace the wording ground floor units with the wording packing shed and office.
I'll second that.
And the reason, simply there are no ground floor units associated with the proposal, and the amended wording more accurately describes the development being considered.
I don't think there's any debate necessary on that one. I'll put that amendment. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Look, although it's a discretionary use under the scheme, from a land use point of view, it's a straightforward proposal that meets the zone objectives, the other applicable requirements of the planning scheme and relevant planning policies, and it fits well with the existing uses on site, including cattle grazing, which I know will be an ongoing use of the site. There are some sensitive receptors nearby, but satisfied from the information provided with the report that compliance with the noise regs can be achieved, and that the operational noise management plan required as a condition of approval will ensure that this is the case. I think we've talked enough about traffic safety. I will just summarise that the amendment, in my view, it's not ideal, but to me it just feels that it creates some flexibility, and if it ends up that this comes back here to be resolved or through another avenue, then so be it. But rather than picking this panel safety versus there's two parties that are pretty certain in their positions on this, and I'm hoping they can go away and re-look at that with a higher level of design at 30%. Hopefully that can be achieved. So on that basis, happy to support the overall proposal.
Thank you. Member Premji as a seconder.
Yes, I concur. I agree with the changes that have been made to the conditions. I support the recommendations with the amended conditions, and given that the applicant has already indicated that there is every possibility or potential of further development on that site, I think it is imperative that the applicant and the Shire address the intersection rules, intersection treatments for both crossovers, for both entry and exit. The reason being is I travel that road a lot and I come across big heavy trucks, and I can see both the applicant's point of view and the Shire's point of view, although a bit mismatched at the particular moment. And I think the safety of the road users is paramount. I'm happy with all the other conditions, and I thank the Shire for the detailed report and the applicants for their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Further speakers on the substantive motion? Oh. Okay, look, I'm fully supportive of it. I don't travel down that road as Member Premji does, but I did go last Friday and have a look there. So I am now slightly familiar with the locality. It's an appropriate use that fits well in the planning framework and its rural setting. The proposed landscaping structures will be largely shielded from, the landscaping will shield the structures from view largely. I note responses from the relevant agencies, particularly DFES, from the officer's advice, the issues raised have been addressed or can be addressed by appropriate conditions. We've discussed the hours of operation, and I support those changes. I also support the changes in relation to public art. And of course, the biggie was condition 6, and I'm pleased that I think that amendment will allow some healthy discussion between the two parties to come up with a proper solution. I also pick up the point of Member Premji there that if there is an expansion of development on the site, then obviously that's going to create more traffic, and perhaps at that time there might be a need to do different works at that intersection. So I'm fully supportive of the proposal and go back to the mover to wind up the debate. Nothing further. I'll put the substantive motion as amended. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. To wind up the meeting, there are no Form 2 applications, no SAT matters in this section, and bidding closure at 11:47. Thanking the panel members, thank you everyone, and the staff and the presenters. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
Very much. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.